Mock soldiers armed with fake guns created a checkpoint on the Irish border as a warning to British Prime Minister Theresa May about the dangers of a hard Brexit. Hundreds of demonstrators were at the event, during which they also demolished a constructed concrete block wall built for the protest.
And it's the ordinary people of Ireland who won't accept the border, so whether they will physically attack a border or not, I don't know, but they certainly won't accept one. But the reality is this isn't about breaking down the border. This is about reminding people not to impose a border.
They claim a hard border could destroy the 20-year-old peace deal. The British and Irish governments have said they hope to avoid a hard frontier, but some analysts suggest that, if customs checks are introduced, security forces may be needed to protect them. Meanwhile, the police service of Northern Ireland has been given extra resources for Brexit, but said that they hope they can adopt a softer community-style approach.
Hello everyone and welcome to tonight's live stream. So it's a very special stream, which is where we're going to be talking about Northern Ireland. And so I just want to make everyone aware it is an interactive broadcast. So if you drop in any comments you think are relevant, let us know some of your thoughts, let us know your opinions on some of the issues we're discussing, and we'll be able to put them up on the screen if they're appropriate. So we ask that there's no profanity language and we'll be able to put them on the screen. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in two of the guests for tonight. So first we have John Yates and Billy Hutchinson. Hi, John. Hi, Billy. How are you guys doing tonight? So I think you need to unmute yourselves, guys.
Yeah, sorry about that, Jack. Yeah, I was sort of muted myself. But look, thanks very much for inviting us along to talk about what it is that's happening in Northern Ireland. As we speak now, everything's quieting down at the minute, but we did have our problems over the last few weeks. Over to you, Billy.
Yeah, thank you, Jack, for inviting me on. I think this is a good opportunity to have this discussion. I think that there's a lot of things that can be discussed tonight. And if people want to actually ask questions, then that'd be great in the chat. Just from my point of view, Jack, I think we want to get our viewpoint across. I think that people talk about Republicans and Republican violence, and then I'm concerned that the British government bow down to that. And we need to realise that we live in a state and we're supposed to have the rule of law, and then people actually say, well, okay, you can't have a rule of law around a border. It's just pretty crazy, like.
No, definitely. And just for the benefit of our audience, would you be able to give a 30 to 60 second introduction about yourself, Billy, and just sort of explain who you are and how you've been involved in this process, for example?
Yeah. My name is Billy Hutchinson. I'm a leader of one of the smaller unionist parties in Northern Ireland, which is called the Progressive Unionist Party. The Progressive Unionist Party, I suppose, was formed in 1979, and it was formed for the very reason that they didn't think that the other parties, the two larger parties, were actually speaking for the people who comes from the communities in which we come from, where most of the conflict was coming from, and also being perpetrated on by the IRA. So that would be the sort of thing we do. We try to represent that, and we would be saying that we don't want young people out on the street rioting. We don't want them to get criminal records, and we'd be looking at other ways of engaging young people and trying to get them involved in peaceful means.
It certainly sounds very good. John, would you be able to give yourself a quick introduction as well?
Yeah, my name's John Yates, and I come from the same place as Billy does, and that's a place that we would often call the heartland of Northern Ireland, and that's a place called the Shankill Road. And Jack, I guess over the years I've taken a keen interest in politics and trying to ensure that people actually don't end up fighting with each other. And too often in our politics we see destabilizers which come along. And my sole aim through the things that I do right now is I become involved in trying to diffuse, I guess, tensions. I have a platform similar to this, and that platform is called Restore UK. And I also tell the victim stories through another platform, and that platform is Forgotten Voices Media. And again, that's what I do.
Awesome, guys. And so again, for the benefit of our audience, so again, you guys are both living in Northern Ireland at the moment. So over here on sort of mainland UK, we only really get a very blinkered view of what's happening at the moment in Northern Ireland. So we didn't hear anything about the build-up to the sort of violence. Then we had loads about violence from loyalist communities in Northern Ireland, and I believe the violence is still continuing, but we've heard nothing since sort of more Republican factions got involved in the sort of rioting and everything. So would you guys be able to give a rundown of what's happening there at the moment, what led to the violence, and sort of the backstory of what's going on at the moment?
Well, Jack, it was very interesting. There was riots up until the Duke of Edinburgh actually died, and people withdrew and haven't got involved since then as a mark of respect. So it shows you people here would be very loyal to the UK and Britain, but they'd also be very loyal to the Queen. And like if you were going round the area that me and John was brought up in, you will see murals of the Queen Mother, and the royal family, and they're there for all to be seen. I have to say that I was actually shocked by people grieving from last Friday, and it was outbursts of people crying and grieving over the death of Prince Philip. So it maybe gives you an idea. We both were brought up in the Shankill. It's a very pro-British part of Belfast, and there's other pro-British areas as well, and they're just as pro-British as the Shankill. But the Shankill seems to get picked out by the media all the time because that's where they want to go and talk to people. So from my point of view, I think that we have a story to tell, and I think that story is about how you're treated in this country by violent nationalism. Whenever you're British, they don't want anything British around them. But still, with all, they've lived in the UK for the last 100 years. Those who's been along, anybody who's been born after 1920 on 21 or after it, have all lived in the UK in that sense. But it's been a long battle and a struggle. It will, we're always told that people who are Republicans or nationalists will tell you that they've had 6 years of persecution from the British. I usually say to them, well, you look well for having 600 years of persecution. It's just propaganda after propaganda about what the British have done. The British done more for people in this place as they have around the world. We know there was an empire at one time. We know that empire's collapsed, and we know that British forces have been in, and other people have been in to actually rebuild these places that they were in. We've seen that in Syria when they were building bridges, and we've seen it in Iraq when we were building community centres and stuff like that. But that's all the stuff that the news don't cover. They only cover the war. So Republicans remind me of the life of Brian. Whenever they say in the life of Brian, whenever they say, "What the Romans ever do for us?" 3 hours later, you can still be rattling off the list, and that's how Republicans are.
Oh, that's a good way of putting it. John, is there anything you'd like to add about why this is happening at the moment in Northern Ireland? You just need to unmute yourself again, John. Apologies.
And I'm meant to host these type of shows, and I'm doing things like that. It's okay to be on the other side. Anyway, yes, look, I would just like to start off, Jack, by saying is that, here's myself and Billy coming from the same area, and we're on the same screen today. And what we're doing is we're actually trying to highlight exactly the same things. But would you believe we don't have the same type of politics? But because that you don't have the same politics doesn't mean to say that you can't focus and you can't unite around the things that actually unite you, as opposed to the things that often divide you. And, that's the message that I would ask people to understand here right around the United Kingdom. What it is that unites each and every one of us from England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland is the very fact that we're British. The very fact that this land has provided for us all and given us all a good degree of life so far. And that's something that we should be seeking to ensure that continues for a very, very long time. And now I'm going to take you back, and I'm going to take you back to the start of the year. And the start of the year, I'm 52 years of age, and all of my life, I was born British. It is my birthright living in Northern Ireland, part of the United Kingdom, to be British. And all of a sudden, at the start of the year there, when it came 1st of January, all of a sudden I feel like a second-class citizen in my own land. And the reason why that I feel like a second-class citizen is that, you know, I voted for Brexit. I don't think Billy did, but Billy can answer for himself. But I voted for to leave the EU for my own reasons. And you know, there was 4 constituent parts that made up the United Kingdom. That was England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And here I am finding myself today in April 2021, where I am not being treated in exactly the same way as people right across the United Kingdom, Jack. And I'm going to say something, but in my book, that is the discrimination. That's exactly what that is. And also that is a corruption of the democracy, which has made this place the stable place that has been up to now, Jack. I hope that explains things.
Yeah, certainly. I think it's very much a frustrating situation for a lot of us. Again, I was a Brexit voter as well, but Brexit, I think Kate Hoey put it best, where people said, oh, Brexit's led to this disaster in Northern Ireland. But she said, well, the point is Northern Ireland hasn't actually had Brexit left. Yeah, sorry, it's been left behind by the government, unfortunately. And this is what has sort of thrown a petrol can on the fire, because it's given hope to a lot of, especially this border down the Irish Sea, it's given hope to a lot of Republican factions that they believe they can now sort of unify Ireland. And so there has been a few sort of aggressions so much from the Republican side, which has led to this increased violence. Would you guys like to talk about them, such as the funeral, such as the PSNI in Northern Ireland? And so, Billy, if you'd like to start, or John, it's up to you guys. And Billy, you just need to unmute yourself again.
I think, Jack, what I want to say is, look, you know, Brexit's happened, so it's no longer about Brexit, you know. So people have left, but I think that what we need to remember is that the reason why Northern Ireland's in the position it's in is because we're the only part of the UK that's in the single market. Now, if the whole of the UK was in the single market, there wouldn't be an issue, and the reason why there wouldn't be, because they wouldn't need to have borders. But the point about it is, Northern Ireland is in a single market, and the rest of the UK got what they voted for, which was to get out. And we were always told that everybody would go out together. And I think that the difficulty now is that because we're in the single market, there's going to be a number of problems, and those problems are around a trade deal. It's around what can come in and out of here. And the difficulty for that is we need to have it resolved in some way. But that's really down to the Prime Minister and the government, how they sort that, because they're the people who are in negotiation with the EU. And the difficulty with that is that it looks like the EU are a bit, how would I say, they're behaving like a spoiled child because UK left. And we've seen it over the vaccine. Like, you know, that vaccine thing had nothing to do with the UK, not a thing. It was down to the people who were actually making the vaccine and distributing it, and that's what their argument was. But they wanted to invoke Article 16 within minutes of that happening, and then they found out hours later, oh, we can't do this, we better not do it, because it's not the British government's fault that we're not getting vaccines. The fault lay with the people in those EU countries who didn't make provision for getting the vaccine early on. And there's one thing we have to say, the government got right was the vaccine. And people can criticise for how many deaths there were, but the vaccine has been absolutely brilliant in terms of the amount of people who's been able to get it. And I think we're down to the 40-year-olds now. So from that point of view, there's good and bad in all of this. And let's be honest about this. And I don't know where it'll happen or not. But if you talk to Tory ministers, they will tell you that it's going to get better because Northern Ireland will benefit from this and all the rest of it. My difficulty is, if I get that benefit, do I still keep my Britishness? And that's the point here. Now, this is about goods. It's not about humans moving about, but it is about goods. But we need to be clear that the Prime Minister, who's a unionist, a Conservative and a unionist, we need to make sure that he protects our Britishness and it's not diluted in any way. If we do become the Singapore of Europe or whatever happens, then, as long as our Britishness is still here, that works. If it's not here, then people will be angry. So, Jack, I think that we need to look at the two scenarios. There's a scenario where things go really bad, and there's a scenario where things could go well. But the important thing for me, and I'm not speaking for John, but I know John would agree with me, the important bit is our Britishness. and that we're still British citizens. We'll still have British passports, and we'll go. The last thing I want to say, Jack, is can you imagine, what it's like living in Northern Ireland and being in the single market? We can't vote for anybody in Europe, but what's going to happen is we're going to be represented by a foreign state, which we have no say in, or there's no democratic votes. We can't say who represents it in Europe. None of that. So from that point of view, that's democracy at its very worst, because there is no democracy for people living in Northern Ireland. And if I want to go and work in Europe as a European citizen, I have to take out an Irish passport. Now, I can tell you now, Jack, I've never asked for an Irish passport, and I won't, because I have a British passport. And, I when I travel around the UK, I can remember a couple of airlines asked me for a passport, and I said I don't have a passport. There's my driving license. It's a UK driving license. And for us, that's what it's about. It's about actually having that freedom. People tell us that we live in a common travel area. And if you live in the Republic, you live in that common travel area as well, because the UK had decided before we went in the EU that to allow people to move freely around the British Isles. And then that was already there whenever we all went in the EU. So from that point of view, what I'm saying to you is, I don't want to find out that I don't have a common travel area anymore within the UK.
Certainly, I think that makes perfect sense. And again, it boils down to, I believe it's an old American adage, no taxation without representation. How can you guys be expected to be bound by the EU and their ridiculous policies, which is why we voted as a nation to leave, and then still be subject to all of the rubbish without, again, having that input? It's nonsensical, and it does need addressing. But John, would you like to add anything to what Billy was saying?
Yeah, Jack. I would just like to address the listeners right around the United Kingdom, and I would like to say that, it was put to me by a professor of politics from the University of Liverpool, a guy called John Tong. He says that the EU played the border issue for all that it was worth. And, and here we are today with the United Kingdom literally having been broken up. And where the danger lies, where I see the danger, and I've seen this really from the start, is that, this is another saying, and this is from someone else, but they say that we're sitting on the window ledge of the Union. We're sitting effectively in an economic United Ireland, so to speak. And right now, what is happening as a result is, and this is twofold, is that a lot of the trade that otherwise would have been back and forward into from Northern Ireland to England, Scotland and Wales and vice versa, we see the Northern Ireland portion of that trade, it is now being reorientated towards the south, and it is now being fed by Europe. And look, we all know that people move only whenever they're pushed to move. And the reality is that if you were to move a bank, say, for example, for any reason, are you going to move back again? And where I see the danger is the longer this protocol lasts, the more trade reorientates towards the Ireland, and then the more trade that is now being fed from the EU. And that damage is irreparable. And then what will happen, Jack, and this is something that I've seen from the very, very start, is that the day after that the whole protocol came into being at the start of the year, it was Ian Blackford, I think they call him, that's part of the Scottish Nationalist Party. Well, he's on our radio channels calling for exactly the same thing. He says it's great that Northern Ireland is in the position whereby that they're part of the EU single market. Now the SNP want exactly the same, and there's calls also from Wales for exactly the same. And herein lies the danger, should I say, is that let's imagine a scenario whereby that this doesn't go away. We stay where we are, and then Scotland starts arguing for same. How is Boris ever going to be able to deny Scotland exactly what we've got and exactly the same for Wales, which then results in England being isolated, game, set and match, everyone back into the EU, because if England stands alone, they'll not be able to resist going back into the EU. So there's where we stand, there's where we are. And it was put to me by Ben Habib on our stream just a few months ago. He says to me, John, effectively the United Kingdom is broken up, and effectively this is the end of the United Kingdom in its embryonic form. So we really need to be looking at things in a way that what we need to do is that we need to roll back, we need to repair. Boris really needs to get up of his backside and do something. I mean, is he going to be going down as the man, the Prime Minister that has ended the United Kingdom? I wouldn't like to be in his shoes, because I don't think that history, or not history, but the future will judge him too well if he does, because there's been a long, it's been around from a very, very long time. And this is where we find ourselves, Jack. And Jack, I can't put the gloss on it, because that is exactly how I feel. And that is how many people in Northern Ireland feel right now. They feel totally shafted, discriminated against, and who by? Not by our enemies, but those that we have looked up to and those that we have pledged our allegiance to for all of these years, Jack.
I think, Jack, John's 100% right in what he says. I hear people, talking about betrayal act and all the rest of it, it's very emotive language. But, what I would say is, an answer to what John's just said. John's 100% right. But Boris's card is, Scotland and Wales do not have a border with an EU country. So that's what makes Northern Ireland unique. Now, whether we like it or whether we don't, we're unique for that reason. And I think that, Boris can't afford to break the union up. He's a unionist and he can't afford to do that. We can't afford to lose Scotland, but that's a political battle for those people in Scotland and for the Tories. They actually make that argument, because I'll tell you why. If Scotland was to leave tomorrow, my understanding is that the UK would no longer be in United Nations. Now, United Nations don't want to lose the UK, because it's very clear, in terms of the British Army and all the other forces, including the Air Force and the Navy, would be much needed because of their skills and their experience in battle. And and that's not just, I'm not talking about the First and Second World War. I'm talking about other theaters of war that has happened in this century. Where all of that's going on, and plus all of the intelligence in terms of those security services or security forces have and stuff like that. So I think that John's right. That's how we all feel, and John's right. It could go down that route, but I think that Boris won't be allowed to go down that route, because I think that the people in the Conservative Party won't let him go there, because they know what the dangers are. So if they don't want the breakup of the union, they need to try to stop those others, but it has to be done by democratic means. And so from our point of view, we're in Europe. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing doesn't really matter. It's a question of our Britishness, and I repeat that because that's the important thing here. But we need to make sure that the UK actually battles to prevent any separatists wanting to leave. And the other thing is, I'm very clear. There's no EU border in near Scotland, England, or Wales. Well, I suppose there is a EU border, and it's in Kent, in the sense that they will have protocols there as well in terms of to keep it. France and them will want it kept out. So I think we need to remember all the positives here, and we can all mistrust prime ministers. And it doesn't matter, what party they're from. I think that everybody will have always found mistrust in the majority of it's been there. But I think that this is the one where we need to be arguing. We need to be making sure that the Conservative Party, those members who are at Westminster, actually understand what needs to be done. And I'm not asking them to go against Boris, but what I asked them to do, or asking them to do, is to make sure that Boris knows where we need to be. I think he does know. He's a prime minister, and he's going to have to make some decisions, and he will make those decisions, which I hope will be in the best interest of the UK and not in the best interest of England.
Certainly, and I think that brings us on nicely to our next question. So, next question I wanted to ask you guys. So, one of the possible solutions to this whole Northern Ireland protocol is introducing a hard border with Southern Ireland. And again, I personally, I do support a hard border, but then to be fair, I don't live in Northern Ireland. So again, I wouldn't sort of feel the lashback of that. Do you guys think there would ever be sort of room for a hard border with Southern Ireland? Again, I take the approach, if the only reason we can't build it is because we're scared about terrorism, I think that's a poor reason to have it, because we should never bow down to the aims of terrorism. Because again, what if ISIS says to the UK, if you don't make gay marriage illegal, we'll bomb Parliament, we'll bomb this, we'll bomb that? Again, I think we've got to draw a line in the sand. And if we don't want a hard border, we've got to say why we don't want a hard border, which isn't just bowing down to what terrorists want. So again, that's my personal opinion. But what do you guys feel? Do you think we'd ever see a hard border with Southern Ireland, or do you think that's just nonsensical?
Sorry, John. Just my view would be that, the only way a hard border comes about is if we leave the EU with no deal. Now, Jack, I don't know. You might know the answer to this. I don't know how we get to a no deal, because we talked about this before. When we talked about hard Brexit meant we'd leave without a deal. I think that's where a hard border would come about, because we would all be out. I can't see how we turn this round. I think we need to wait to October, and October's a long way off. But I think we need to wait till the grace period's over to see how this works in terms of that. But in the meantime, it's going to be hard, because I can't see how Boris gets himself out of this. But we need to actually be pressurising them to do something. But if they were to withdraw and say to Europe, right, we're leaving, we're not doing a deal, then I think that brings about a hard border in Northern Ireland.
Okay. John, what's your take on a possible hard border situation?
Jack, I'd just like to make everyone aware that there was no one that was calling for a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. I mean, I think, and again, I'm not speaking for Billy, but I think he would echo what it is that I'm saying, is that, we've had relative peace for many, many years. And, there's people in Northern Ireland that they call themselves nationalists, and they align, or they want to suggest that they want to align to the Republic of Ireland. And that's all very well. I mean, we accept that. We accept that everybody has the right to their own political allegiance. But all we would expect in return, by the way, is for nationalists, Republicans, to accept that we're British and that we have a right to remain part also of the United Kingdom. And again, I make that clear that no one was calling for a hard border. But what happened as a result of the Brexit process is that, and again, this was words that was used by John Tom, Professor of Politics from the University of Liverpool, that the EU played the border for all it was worth. And there was a conglomerate of people, from the Irish government to Republicans to all sorts of commentators, media journalists, they were all talking up the threat of violence. Jack, could I just ask you, I popped up a little video there on the bottom of the screen. Could you just pop that up in full screen, play that there, and then I'll come back and I'll just finish what it is that I'm going to say.
Perfect, yeah.
Border is going to look like?
It would involve customs posts, it would involve people in uniform, and it may involve the need, for example, for cameras, physical infrastructure, possibly police presence or an army presence to back it up. The problem with that in the context of Irish politics and history is those things become targets.
Exactly.
If they attempt to put a recognisable border on the island of Ireland, I guarantee, in fact, I know that arrangements are already being made. There'll be violence again.
Now, checks on the border would, I think, allow some people who are a small minority but who still want to carry on violence, would allow them the opportunity to attack border posts or border guards.
The UK government says that it won't put up a border even if there isn't a deal. So the EU will insist on a border.
We have to make sure that the interests of the European Union and of the internal market will be preserved.
It'll be a hard border. They will put up checkpoints. They will eventually have to put police to protect customs officers. The police will need the protection of the British Army, and we're back to square one.
It would be my judgment that if there was a hard Brexit and a border with physical structure, I would be very sure that the dissidents would be violently against it.
Even violence could return if that border is put into place in some way.
There is a fear, and I'd have to say that fear has grown more and more over the last few years. I mean, we know there's dissident activity. We know they've been recruiting.
All of us built the Good Friday Agreement and a peace process that's now very robust. But Brexit threatens to sunder all of that.
We do not want a guarded border.
Keep history in mind.
There is still women and men that are willing and capable of carrying out acts of armed resistance against the British state.
We have the dissidents on our group who feed off these spectaculars, and there is no doubt that they will attack any type of installation along that border.
In fact, I know that arrangements are already being made. There'll be violence again.
Now, Jack, now that I'm sort of back and after people haven't seen that video, what you will have noticed that you'll have noticed the threat of violence by many people, and that included Republicans, that included, you know, the Irish government, that included people like Bertie Ahern, who was involved with Billy at the time of the peace process, running up to the times of the Good Friday Agreement and so on. And every one of them were talking up the threat of violence. And the reality is that it wasn't British Unionists that were threatening violence. And here we are, and this is how we feel as Unionists. I mean, I talk to people on our platform very regularly, and I talk to people far and wide, and people feels that the threat of violence means that our democracy was denied, means that we weren't treated the same as British Unionists in England, Scotland and Wales, and means right now, just completely, there's no other way to describe this, but our democracy was removed from us so that because of the threat of IRA violence. So let's just make that absolutely clear to the people of England, Scotland and Wales, those that would think, if by going by the media, that the big bad loyalists are the bad boys. It wasn't the loyalists that instigated anything. People here feel genuinely aggrieved, and where I'm going to say something here, but I haven't seen tension in Northern Ireland like I've seen. I mean, the last time I seen this was probably 1985, Billy, in around the time of the Anglo-Irish Agreement. I haven't seen the depth of feeling registering so high. So, we've got to be very careful. And, here's what I'm saying. I'm appealing to people in the Conservative Party right now, and I'm saying to them is that why is it that one should be enhanced at the expense of another? Why is it that one should be built up whilst they demonise and they diminish others? Because as a result of what has just happened, some people, and wrongly, I'm going to state that quite clearly, wrongly, some people over the past lot of weeks there, before the death of Philip, some people they took it upon themselves to go out and to riot. And I'm going to state quite clearly, and I'm sure Billy will do the same, that rioting serves no one's any purpose. And we don't want to see our young people going to jail. But believe me, a lot of these people, they think that their Britishness is being removed from them. They think that the Republican movement have a hierarchy of rights, and they think because of the threat of violence, well, violence pays, and that's not the sort of message that you want to send out to anyone, Jack. So I hope that helps people understand that it's not the Unionists that are threatening violence. It is Republican threat of violence that has us exactly where we are.
Certainly. And again, that actually brings us on to an interesting point. So Anto Wickham has just popped in. Why am I feeling like a second-class citizen within my own nation? We have this certainly in England. I imagine it's the same in Scotland and Wales as well. But lots of people are talking about sort of almost like a two-tier policing system at the moment. So that's something which is hitting us in England. So if we have anything which is particularly in London that doesn't go along with Sadiq Khan's agenda, the police clamp down very heavily on it. But it seems the BLM can protest whenever they want to. The Socialist Workers' Party can protest whenever they want to. Labour MPs can break all the coronavirus legislation and protest whenever they wanted to. But I had friends who were doing anti-paedophile demonstrations and spreading awareness about child abuse, and they were thrown in the back of meat wagons and treated quite roughly by the police for breaking coronavirus legislation in small numbers. But then you have these massive marches, but because they're PC, because they're woke, they're left alone. It's like, do you have a similar thing in Northern Ireland with the PSNI?
Well, Jack, I think I recognise what you're saying, because we see it on ITN all the time and BBC about demonstrations and whether the police did it right or did it wrong. And I get what you mean. I understand that completely. But what I have to say to you is when you take it to Northern Ireland, you're talking about a divided society. So therefore, if the PSNI treat a Republican funeral differently from the treat everything else, then you can imagine how much of that could create a powder keg. Because in a divided society, if people aren't being treated equal, but what I would say, Jack, is that this has been about for a long time. This isn't anything new. Back when we had a flag protest about the Union flag being removed from the City Hall, with very little people who actually argued to have it removed. I think it was about 38 people wanted it removed. Now, Jack, I have to say to you, and I'm sure it's the same in London if you were going past anywhere, would you be cricking your neck to look at a Union flag up on top of a building? You have to look for it. It's not like, unless it's not there. It is there, but you know what I mean. You have to look for it. But I have a saying in this country. People will travel 50 miles just to get insulted, and that's what we need to watch. I remember during one of the World Cups, I can't remember which one it was, where people were complaining about the English flag plan because England were in the World Cup and were saying it's a racist flag. How can a flag be racist? And that's the argument. People will say, oh, it's a racist flag. You can't stop people in the National Front from using a Union flag or an English flag. I mean, if that's what they're going to wave. The same as we can't stop people in the IRA from flying a tricolour. And that's the issue. But what I want to say is that it's very, very dangerous in a divided society. It's been about for a long time. The police tactics are different. And, people are getting harassed and harangued. And I know that can happen in and around anywhere in England, where it's in Yorkshire or even in London, where people can be stopped and searched, and there's a lot of arguments around that. But, it's not just happening to one section of people. It happens to quite a lot. So, the point I'm making here is about how you do this. And people have to see that the law is fair and that the rule of law applies to everybody and not just one section of the community.
Certainly. John, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, again, I'd like to just firstly make it very, very clear. And again, this is something that Billy didn't say, but I mean, the both of us, we support the rule of law. We support law and order because, I mean, we've had this conversation on our platform a few times, is that, I mean, we support a society in where everyone is subject to and equal under the same law. And whenever the perception, and this is words from Billy just a few weeks ago when he was on with me, but whenever there's a perception that there's an imbalance, well, that can create a huge problem. And just a few weeks ago, I'm going to tell you about two incidents, Jack, with regard to the PSNI. What I do on a platform called Forgotten Voices Media, I tell victim stories. And I often talk to victims who would say that they would like to be able to forget. After all of these years, 23 years after the Belfast Agreement was signed, that's the Good Friday Agreement for people in England. But 23 years after the Good Friday Agreement, we still have a scenario whereby that victims feel as if they're not being permitted to forget. And they feel that they're not being permitted to forget because the Republicans, they have the perception that Republicans continue to re-traumatize them and continue to add insult to their injuries. And Republicans do this, I think, in a very, very calculated way. So, and why do they do it? I mean, no one wants to check them. No one wants to tackle them. No one wants to cause offence. And this is my honest opinion. Why? Because they are there. They're an organisation which can threaten violence. I mean, I can remember just at the time of a time in our history known as Drumcree. I can remember the then Chief Constable Ronald Flanagan saying, and this just about typifies what happens in Northern Ireland. But he says that he is policing on the basis that he turns his force against the lesser of two evils. And I just think about that. Policing in a society whereby that they turned their PSNI against the lesser of two evils. And at that time, who was the lesser of two evils? Well, the lesser of two evils were the British Unionist people in Northern Ireland who don't want to wreck our country, who don't want to destabilise the United Kingdom and don't want to cause any problems within the United Kingdom. But Republicans are in a position whereby that they agitate against our community, they agitate against people within our community, they agitate against their victims, to the point whereby that some people, sometimes they then bite back. And then what happens, that it starts a whole new warring front. So we're in this position whereby that the police, in my honest opinion, that they won't police because of the threat of violence against Republicans, and then people are wound up because of this here. So two things happened in the past few weeks, and then I'll draw to a close. But we had a scenario where the Chief Constable, Simon Byrne, where he was on a Zoom meeting with a man called Maguire and another man called Sean Murray, Spike Murray, both leading IRA figures. Now, here's the significance of that day just a few weeks ago. There was a time in our history when two corporals, they drove into an IRA funeral, Howes and Wood, they called the people, and they were totally slaughtered, and I mean in a heinous crime, a heinous act. They were barbarically slaughtered by the IRA just off the Falls Road in Belfast. Now, here's the significance. Simon Byrne was on a Zoom meeting with Mr. Maguire on a day that it was those two corporals, their anniversary. Now, Mr. Maguire was the man that was charged and went to jail, and he was let out as a result of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, and he was let out of prison. Now, here's what happened. People said to the Chief Constable, Simon Byrne, I mean, was that not insensitive, at the very, very least, that you were on a Zoom meeting with those people on the day that, you're on the Zoom meeting with the victim maker on the day of the anniversary of his victims. And do you know what the Chief Constable did? Well, he says, well, and rightly so, he says, well, look, I mean, I talk to restorative justice people in all around Northern Ireland, and I'll continue to talk to restorative justice people. That's people who are involved within their communities, trying to, make a different way for people that has, caused problems within their community. But I'm just going to say this here. People from within our community look at that and they see the Chief Constable, seemingly bowing over to these people. And then we had another incident just a few weeks ago, or it was last year, and it's really playing out in our media now. And that's where, COVID regulations, everybody accepted that there was restrictions on funerals and on weddings and, going to the pubs and all of those things. And, we accepted that as law. And from the British Unionist people's perspective, what we did is that we went along with the guidelines. Now, a leading Republican died, a man called Bobby Story, and the Sinn Féin organisation, which is linked to this IRA organisation that are in our government, that made these rules, that made these regulations for ordinary people. Well, what did they do? They brought 2,000 people out onto the streets of West Belfast to have this funeral, and then we seen that it now comes out within the past few weeks. There was various inquiries into it, and it's now coming out at the PSNI. What they did is they actually facilitated that funeral. But what that does, Jack, is that makes people within our community, it maddens them. It makes them feel as if that they don't matter. It makes them feel as if that the Republicans have a hierarchy of rights. They can threaten violence. They can threaten the threat of violence over a border. They can threaten violence to such a stage, Jack, and this is how serious this is, that we have been removed from the United Kingdom as a result. And that's not the way to build stability within any society. And I fear that if we're going to continuously go down this line, I mean, we won't be able to appeal to some people to not be mad, to not be angered. And that's unfortunate, and it really, really needs to be looked at. And again, I'm appealing to, I know that those that are watching this here from England, if you cherish the United Kingdom, if you have any, if you have any integrity at all, you really need to try to ensure that we as British Unionists in Northern Ireland are not treated as second-class citizens. Billy, there's an old saying from the past, and it is this. It says that their only crime was loyalty. And that stands today. That's our only crime. We're the ones that are continuously agitated against, and that's just unfortunate in part of the United Kingdom that is Northern Ireland.
Oh, certainly. Billy, is there anything you'd like to add there at all?
No. I'm happy enough with what John's just said. I just think that it's, in terms of people sort of outside of Northern Ireland, but in the rest of the UK, must find this very, very hard to actually understand. It is very difficult. It's not easy to understand, even if you live here. But John has described it well. I think the problem with the policing is that it's whether you do hard policing or you do soft policing, and police officers are trained to actually decide. And we've seen it in England, Jack. And this in terms of whenever people are out protesting, if they're not socially distancing, then we've seen some things and they look bad. But not knowing all the context, that's the problem. And I think that the difficulty here is that the police need to start to do it the same way. You can't stand back and gather information and then arrest people later, and then in another community, you're not interested in doing that. So I think the difficulty is, and we need to remember this, that on the day of that funeral, the police had worked with Sinn Féin and the Republican movement for 4 days. And the difficulty with that was that what made it even worse was the senior officers refused to answer questions. So when they sent it to the public prosecution said to the police, "We can't charge these people because you were working with them for 4 days. So what are you going to charge them with?" And the difficulty with that was that they got it wrong, because the people who were there were the lawmakers. And on that day, they were the lawbreakers. They were the people who give us the COVID legislation. They were the people who tell us when we can open the gyms. They're the people that tell us how many people can be at a funeral or at a crematorium. So, so that's the difficulty. And whenever you mix that up in the police and then try to prosecute people, you've lost your case. It's not the first time it's happened with the Republicans. We've had it before. And again, the police continually mess this up. They need to understand what it is they're doing and how they actually do this in terms of exercising it. Now, I was on radio last week with a guy who was ex-police, and he was talking about the tactics. And he said on the show, look, listen, people are talking about this in the wrong way. And he came out, he said, look, listen, the reality is, how can you work with Republicans for 4 days, then expect to bring charges against them and expect the public prosecution to actually implement charges? It's impossible, because you've already contaminated the whole thing by working with them for 4 days. So you can't then say, well, they broke the law. I mean, what were you doing for 4 days? It's very complicated. But, in terms of all of that, mistakes like that can lead to what we've seen on the streets here. And therefore, I think that the police need to be very careful. And I'll be honest with you, half the times the police is in the middle and they don't know what to do. But the reality is, it's our officers that are getting hurt. And they need to sort it out. They need to actually police, and they need to decide how they're going to police, and they need to police the same way in all communities.
Certainly, and I think it's the biggest sort of slap in the face with all of this is obviously the Republicans can march with an IRA terrorist with a 2,000 sort of congregation attending his funeral, but we can't have a big funeral for Prince Philip at all. We have to confine that to 30 people to the extent the Prime Minister said he wouldn't attend because he didn't want to take up a space to allow the royals or the royal family to come along to it. And so if the highest office, the highest position in our country is respecting the coronavirus legislation, what gives the right for a murdering terrorist to be allowed a massive funeral against everything else and be allowed for that to happen and cooperate with? For me, it doesn't make any sense at all. And then going back to your earlier point where you said it's with the police, they have to decide a hard or soft approach. I think certainly it's not really for us to tell the police whether they should have a hard or soft approach. It's for them to decide, but it has to be consistent. And I think that's the thing that's lacking, because say you have a protest and the police are rough-handed with you, you might think that's not fair. But it stings even more if they then treat other people with a soft-handed approach. If they're rough-handed with everyone, you know where you stand and you know how to facilitate that and avoid the escalation. Whereas if they're soft-handed with everyone, you can accept that as well. But this whole, we clamp down on some people and we don't on other people, I just find it frankly ridiculous. And it creates hostility. It creates the feeling of second-class citizenship in this country. And that's not where we should be. Again, as you guys have both said, we need to return to the rule of law in this country, where everyone, regardless of who you are, is treated exactly the same. And that's what made Britain great for a long time. And it's a shame to see us deviating away from that.
Jack, but I just want to say something about the Prince Philip's funeral. I mean, what that says to me is, that the royals actually made a decision about that. And what they did was that they were having his funeral exactly the same as everybody else had to have it. And they know that thousands of people didn't get to see their parents or their son or daughter, whoever it was, died. And the royals just said, well, if it's good enough for the citizens of this country, then it has to be good enough for us. And I see that as a very sort of like, how would I describe it? It's a very humble thing, because they're doing that knowing that if they wanted to, they could do it another way, but they didn't. They recognized the people who died and couldn't actually have everybody at the funeral. So I think we need to see it in a very positive way. And we also, I see it as them saying, tell the government and everybody else, we're no different. We have to stick by these rules, and we have to stick by lockdown rules. And they've done it. So I think that, for me, he did the right thing. And I just think that shows you how that family has worked. I mean, we know that the royals aren't perfect. They're like the rest of us, are human beings. But I think the Queen's been here for 73 years, and Prince Philip was by her side. And I think that what she has done and what he did when he was alive was actually show people. Now, I have to tell you, I was in Belfast City Council the other night, and the IRA talked about the royal family as being peacemakers. These people know how to do their propaganda.
No,
and I'm talking about the IRA, so just in case anybody thinks I'm talking about the IRA. But I mean, they just played it like a fiddle, and they talked about how wonderful that Prince Philip was and the Queen was, it all goes back, and this is why they said it. It all goes back. The Queen and Prince Philip shook hands with Martin McGuinness, and I have to say, the IRA murdered Lord Mountbatten, and we know Prince Philip's relationship there, but I don't think he spent much time to talk to him, but the Queen did. So what I'm saying to you is that they pulled off a master propaganda stroke the other night. Whenever other people from different backgrounds didn't turn up, they turned up and they made sure that they paid that tribute to the Queen. Now, I'm saying to you that I think that was Emmons playing a game. Maybe they were sincere, but I don't believe it anyway.
No, certainly, I think you're right there. I think for people whose supporters don't normally have a nice word to say about the royal family, it seems a bit almost like crocodile tears or crocodile memories, I guess, so to speak. But there we have it. You're dealing with these sorts of people. You expect those sorts of tactics from them. But speaking of sort of IRA individuals, again, both of you guys grew up during the Troubles. Do you think we're ever going to see, and I know you're involved in the Good Friday Agreement, do you think we'll see a return to the Troubles? Do you think it's going to escalate to that level? Because that's something certainly the English press is putting around at the moment, that Northern Ireland really is a tinderbox at the moment.
Well, it is a tinderbox, Jack. There's no question that. What I would say to you is that lots of people don't want that to happen. But the difficulty, I think, is the longer this goes on and the worse it gets, by the time we get to October and nothing's happened. Because, look, listen, let's be very clear about this. People will turn on the politics. And what I would say to people is that whether we like it or whether we don't, we have a framework in Northern Ireland, as there is in the rest of the UK, where politics can make change. We have a democratic right to protest. So all of that's there, and people should use that, but they have to do it in a peaceful way. So what I'm saying to you is we shouldn't underestimate the anger and the frustration, and we shouldn't underestimate, because people are calling for calm, that their patience will run out. We've got to go to October until this grace period's over, and I think that Boris will go the whole way with us. So he needs to be very careful about how much more anger and frustration is built up. What I'm saying is, I think we shouldn't be at that point. I think when you get to that point, it's because democracy has broke down and you've no other option. But for me, I think that we're not there yet. So I think that we need to all work together and make sure that we protest about this, we complain about it, but we do it all in a peaceful way. Because I'll tell you why, Jack. With 30 years of troubles, and nobody could hear anything because the bombs was going off and people were being shot, right? And it was happening on both sides. But the point I want to make is nobody hears your voice. It can't be heard. Any arguments you make are dead because they can't hear with the noise. So what I want unionism to do, and I'm talking here about unionism, I mean everybody, irrespective of where they describe themselves as Protestant, Unionist or Loyalist, we all need to be together in this, because, you can be sure that the world media will turn their cameras on us and they will blame us for what's going on. And the IRA and Sinn Féin will sit back and rub their hands and say, let them destroy themselves. We cannot destroy ourselves. We cannot destroy the union. And I would be saying to people, irrespective of whether we think or that anybody thinks that Boris has betrayed, what we need to remember is that the British governments we're still part of the United Kingdom. And Jack, I argue all the time. I like to think that I'm a confident unionist and I'm confident in the union. And I say this all the time. I'm not a unionist amongst 900,000. I'm a unionist amongst 64 million. And I think that's what we need to remember.
100% there. No, I completely agree with you. John, do you have any input on this topic at all? Do you think we're likely to see a return to the Troubles?
Jack, I done an interview with a guy in the Times just a couple of weeks ago, and he had asked me, was there going to be any possibility of violence in Northern Ireland? And I called it in a way that I says, no chance. How wrong was I? Because within a few days there was violence that was visited to the streets of Northern Ireland. So all it takes is a small spark that could light a flame. And this was put before, and I think it was David Irvine that says this, Billy, is that a genie in a bottle, once it's out of the bottle, it's easy out, but it's very, very hard putting it back in again. And it was only for the Philip Dan that out of a mark of respect, community leaders had appealed to people not to cause any problems, and not to say that they weren't appealing to people anyway from beforehand, but I don't think that the people on the ground actually would have listened. And, again, I'm appealing to anyone in a position of authority. I think it's incumbent upon those people to try to understand what it is that's at stake here. People who have a birthright, part of Northern Ireland, part of the United Kingdom, and right now we clearly see that Northern Ireland actually has been separated from the United Kingdom, albeit for trade purposes, and we're linked in many, many other ways. But I say that there's a huge amount of danger that lies if we don't try to turn this around, that if we don't try to, I'm talking about the EU here for a moment. And I'm saying that, I decided that I wanted to leave the EU because I just see the EU as people who don't listen and who force things in a way that can be detrimental to societies. And that's how I've seen the EU for a long time. Am I saying that that you shouldn't be part of a wider union whereby that you trade and you look after each other and you help each other out? Well, no, I'm not. But I just feel that the EU were encroaching upon us in a way whereby that they were trying to completely take us over, absorb us, and dictate a lot of the rules and the regulations. And for me, that was totally, totally wrong. And whenever we look at the EU right now, they're not listening. You heard Michel Barnier in that little video that was playing there, that he said, well, we have to have a border where, to protect the EU single market, is exactly what he said. And I'm a logical person, and I could have solved that very, very simply because, they could have given Ireland special status to trade throughout with the rest of the United Kingdom, but they didn't want to do that. They wanted to cause problems. And for that reason, as I say, you ask me, could violence return to the streets again? Well, I would hope not. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart, because I'm going to quote a time, and Billy knows about this time, and this is something that is very, very dear to both of our hearts. But, you know, we seen 9 innocent men, women and children in 23rd of October 1993 being obliterated, basically, being blown up, blown to pieces, all because the two communities came against each other. And we've got to really talk in a way that we try to avert that at all costs. And, you know, we can't do that right now, because we can't stop the IRA from agitating against people and winding people up. It's the British government that need to do that. It's the Irish government need to do that. It's the European Union that need to do that. And also it's the security services that need to do that. So it's not within our power to stop this here. So I would appeal to those in power that really what we've got to do, and this is the key word, we've got to find a balance, because without balance, we won't have stability, Jack.
No, certainly. I think that actually brings us nicely onto our final question. But again, if you guys are happy, we will take a couple of questions from the audience afterwards as well. So if that's right with you guys, if you have any questions, guys who are watching, if you drop them in the chat, and then we'll choose, say, 2 or 3, depending on time, of the most suitable ones. But on to sort of the last question that I wanted to ask you guys. So again, I think we find it quite hard in the rest of the UK to understand how it's possible almost for Republican and Unionist communities to live side by side when one sort of seeks the abolishment of the nation state of Northern Ireland as part of the UK and really just wants it to become one island, whether that's under the South or their sort of IRA manifesto. So do you think it is possible for these communities to coexist? We have had sort of relative peace for, was it 23 years almost now? Do you think that will continue, or do you think it's only sort of a plaster over a leak sort of thing, or a tape over a leak? So Billy, would you like to go first?
Well, yeah, sorry, I was waiting on John going there. I thought John was going to go. Yeah, no, look, I think for the English audience, you know, what people need to understand is that Northern Ireland's 100 years old, and Republicans will continue to argue that's a failed state. Now, I think any state that goes for 100 years, if I had a company and somebody said it had failed, it was still there 100 years later, you know, must be doing something right. But, you know, the problem has been, you know, throughout the years is Republicans don't believe in peace and reconciliation. What Republicans want is they want a British Prime Minister to stand to dispatch box and take responsibility for the last 600 years or whatever they say. I think the plantation started in 1601, so I don't think it should be going back any further than that, but they do. But anyway, the point I'm making here is that they're not interested in peace and reconciliation. What they're interested in is domination, and I think that's the problem. So they will say all the nice pleasantries. So to give an example, the Belfast Agreement or the Good Friday Agreement, whenever people were working on that, it was seen as an agreement. And that meant that there'd be an agreement between the UK, Republic of Ireland, and obviously Northern Ireland, with the UK being the government, British government. The IRA were given get out of jail free cards. The people who were on the run by Tony Blair, you know, and that was totally outside the agreement. That was never agreed in the room. And I think that, you know, so that was the beginning, because for the simple reason that there were people who were out there who had bombed London and bombed other places, and they were allowed to come back to Northern Ireland and weren't going to be charged. They didn't extend that to anybody else, only Republicans. So, I mean, they're not interested in trying to make the Assembly work. They're not interested in trying to make Northern Ireland work. What they want is United Ireland. Now, you know, me and John are British. We don't want to be in United Ireland, no matter what the offer is. But the difficulty is that the IRA think we're deluded Irishmen, and we'll all waken up and realise we should be in United Ireland. I don't have a problem having friendly neighbours, you know, and trying to work on that basis. And John said there, you know, we could have agreed to be doing trade across each other, things like that. Or if I was in a car accident, you know, over the border at Dundalk, that an air ambulance could lift me and take me to the Royal or take me to wherever hospital it could actually do if I had brain damage or whatever. And that's the problem. And the problem is, I think, that they're not interested in peace and reconciliation. What they're interested in is a British Prime Minister saying it was all the British fault. And it isn't and wasn't. And I would remind people who live in the Republic or people who live in Northern Ireland, they had a decision to make back in 21 and they made that decision. Now, albeit that it ended the Civil War because the people who wanted to leave Great Britain left, and the Republicans who thought that they got a bad deal then had a civil war. But the reality was they did it through politics and they left. So from that point of view, they need to realise this wasn't something that was pushed on them. And if they wanted to leave, they left, and they're on their own. But they can't keep blaming Northern Ireland. The people in Northern Ireland didn't want to leave, and I think that in many ways, when you look back on it, we left people back in the other three counties. It was part of Ulster at the time who were British, and they were left behind. And to this day, 100 years later, those people will say to you, you deserted us, you left us behind. So we need to take some responsibility for that. Not me and John, because we weren't about. We're not that old. But, in terms of what happened, but Republicans will not give up until they have a united Ireland. And I can tell you now, I said, me and John and any other one won't want to do this. But the difficulty is that no matter what happens, and if they were to get a united Ireland tomorrow, and they won't, but if they were, you can bet that the biggest opposition to any united Ireland is Sinn Féin, because we know that if Sinn Féin had a united Ireland tomorrow, they would have power in the north, whether it was Northern Ireland, where it was 6 counties or 9 counties, and what they would do would be that they would persecute people. We've seen the Protestant population in the Republic disappear very quickly, and the same would happen here. We'd be driven out. We'd have to go and live in Yorkshire or London or wherever, but the problem is that the IRA and Sinn Féin would persecute people, and they would be in total power up here because they'd be given a parliament and they would be in total power. So, people need to be realistic about this. Now, what I would say, Jack, is, that the difficulty is unless somebody's going to pay for repatriation of people who can't afford to go, I don't want to see the classes getting up and going because they've got the money. They need to actually make sure. I won't be about, and I'm sure John won't be about. And I'm not saying, John, you're old, but I don't see this happening in the next 10 or 15 years. So from my point of view, I'll be 66 this year, so in 10 or 15 years, I may not be about. But it's a serious situation, and I just think that we need to prepare our people if a border poll ever comes. I don't think Boris is going to call one in the next 5 or 7 years, but we'll see. It depends on how much pressure is put on him. He will have the same problem in Scotland if the SNP run away with this, but I'm sure that they'll find ways of actually trying to prevent that from happening.
Fair enough. Very good points made there. Just before we move on to John, just to everyone watching, don't forget to stick your questions in the chat, and we'll pick the top 2 to answer after this. But John, would you like to give your response to this question as well? Do you think there can be a sort of maintained peace, or do you think sort of peace is temporary in Northern Ireland?
Yeah, Jack, I would just like for people to think about this in their minds. And it was Billy that actually prompted me with something that he said. But, it was 100 years ago. It was 1921 when they say that the partition of Ireland happened. And, and it was, Billy just stated it clearly there, it was that they wanted to leave the rest of Britain at the time, the rest of the United Kingdom. And they did. They voted and away they went. And then Northern Ireland ended up sort of separated. But just think about this for one moment, is that no Republican, or not, I would say that there's very, very few Republicans that lived back then 100 years ago that is alive today. And, and these people that are here today, they're still fighting the battles of the past. And it says in a song, the worn out dreams of yesterday is what they're talking about. And I can state this quite clearly. I mean, Billy comes from a party there, the Progressive Unionist Party. And I can remember in around the time, 1994, whenever there was ceasefires, whenever that Republicans first, they said that they would lay down their arms and they would talk towards peace. And that, from my recollection, and Billy will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was September of 1994, Billy. Is that right, isn't it? And then, and then Billy's party, then they came along in October of 1994, and they did the same. And I can remember that the people that Billy represents is that they expressed what was known as true and abject remorse. And what they meant was that, the bitterness and the hatred from the past, it should never have happened. And really, that what they wanted to do is they wanted to reach out and they wanted to build a peace process. They wanted to build peace. They wanted to build peace with their neighbours. And that's exactly what came from the people that Billy came from. But on the Republican movement, you see, they didn't see that as a peace process. They seen it as a process, okay, but a process that would lead them into what they call a united Ireland. And here we are in 2021. And today they're still fighting this worn out dream of yesterday. And here's the reality. The reality is that a united Ireland has now transformed into what they say is a new Ireland. And Republicans have accepted this, and they're trying to move their base into this mindset whereby that when we get to this so-called new Ireland, that the flag of the state will be away, that the national anthem will be away, that they're even talking about in the Irish government right now that they may not even call it the Republic of Ireland. And what they're doing is that I think that if we ever did get there, Jack, I think that a lot of people, Republicans included, they'll be getting to a place that won't be the romantic dream that they thought that they were going to have, what they were fighting for all of those years. And Republicans know this fine well. I'm talking about the leadership, the hierarchy within Republicanism. Because right now, let me just say this, is that I have a lot of Catholic friends. I have a lot of nationalist friends. Now, will I ever reconcile with Republicans? Well, not whilst they continue to add insult to the injury of the victims, not while they continue to traumatize their victims, not while they continue to destabilize society. In 1996, Jack, when we had a real opportunity for peace, when people actually grabbed and grasped the opportunity for peace, these people let off a bomb in the Docklands in London, and it caused £500 million worth of damage. And they did that whilst they were talking peace, and they did that in a calculated way. What they did that for, Jack, was they did that there to send a shot across the bow of the British government. If we don't get our way, well, this is what we'll go back to. And how is it that we could ever build peace and make peace with those people? I'm going to suggest right now is that those people can't be trusted. We have seen how that they make rules within the Stormont, the Legislative Assembly, and then they go out and they break the rules, and they do also that in a calculated way. These people can't be trusted. Do you know what do I say those people are? Those people are the biggest criminal gang that has ever been seen in Europe, and right now they still are that criminal gang. So could I make peace with ordinary nationalists? Could I make peace with ordinary Catholics? Absolutely, all day long. In fact, that we need to reach across divides and we need to build peace with those people. But as for Republicans, well, whilst those people still exist, I'm going to say a lot of people would have the mindset that I would. Those people do nothing but destabilise society. So the answer is that can there ever be peace in Ireland? Can there ever be a united Ireland? Well, to get a united Ireland, it takes united people. And whilst republicanism exists, you'll never unite people, Jack. It's just as simple as that.
No, very well said. I think I largely agree with you there as well. And I think that's one of the issues we see with lots of political factions, and even with the modern left at the moment. The more people associate with extremists, the rest of the people will never negotiate with them, because you're not just negotiating with everyday people, good people. By talking to them, you're also talking to these nutters behind the scenes. And so you're never going to reach a good conclusion for the nation, because you have to cater to extreme views. Again, I think that's something which a lot of political movements could benefit from, is distancing themselves from the extreme elements, because again, that's the beautiful thing about the UK, is we've never had an extremist government, we've never had extremist politics in this country, because life has always been good. And it's really a shame to see these extremist elements start to creep in and take over in places like Northern Ireland, where we've never had a history of that before. But moving on, so again, just because of time, I'm conscious of time, I'll ask you guys two of the questions. So the first one, which I'm going to put on the screen, is what do you guys think that, I'm assuming, Arlene Foster can do about this, and what is the best move she can make politically? I guess I'm going to assume Josh means to preserve the union and keep sort of Northern Ireland as part of the union. So Billy, would you like to go first? Oh, you just need to unmute yourself again. So.
I'm not actually sure in terms of what Arlene or anybody else can do in all of this. I think obviously, I think they're obviously in contact with Boris and other people in the government. And I think it's a question of actually trying to get that across. It's very difficult in terms of dealing with this. If we're talking about, Brexit and the protocols, I don't see what they can do. They've got a legal challenge at the minute, and we'll have to wait and see what happens there. And obviously, they're talking. Their MPs have been talking to some of the people in the different groups around the Brexit thing, but I think for me, and I've been calling for this, I think the political parties need to get together and have a convention to discuss half of this, to find out how we move forward, because there's so many issues. And I think that people in our society want to see this, because they want to see a united voice. I think that the difficulty around that at the moment is that the larger parties have got an election next year, and they probably won't want to be giving much of that up. But I do think we need to be doing something at this stage, and we need to be getting the voice out, and it has to be a united voice, and we have to have all talking, off the same page, rather than talking all over the place. So from my point of view, I think the best thing she could do is to get together with the other parties in terms of unionism, and start to lead us forward. This is 100 years, and we should have been doing something very special this year. And we haven't been able to do anything really because of the pandemic, and anything we've had to do has been done virtually like this. So from that point of view, I think that Arlene could show a bit of leadership and agree to pull the parties together and move forward and give the people some sort of hope. But that, for me, the hope would be around the union and around our Britishness, and about opposing any form of united Ireland. And I think that when I say oppose, we need to talk about how important the union is, and how important that Northern Ireland has been to the union, and about the importance of the whole United Kingdom, because I think we need to do that. As I said earlier, there's too many separatists out there who want to withdraw, and I think that we need to be actually making sure that we politically challenge that, no matter where it comes from, where it's Irish or Scottish or Welsh nationalists. We need to actually prevent that, and the only way we can do that is a united nation. And I
think as Billy froze in there, his internet might have timed out, which is not great. But John, would you like to sort of give your 2 cents on the question? And I'm just going to take Billy out, and then when it looks like he's back, I'll bring him back in.
Right, okay. Yes, okay. So Arlene Foster is what this man is referring to. Arlene Foster is the leader of the biggest party in Northern Ireland right now, the DUP, the Democratic Unionist Party. And, we had a somewhat unity in December of 2019 at the general election, whenever most people, they stood around the DUP to get the DUP elected. And the DUP, in the English press, they get a bad press in the English press, but they're not that bad of a party, in all fairness. So Arlene Foster being the leader right now, you see, here's what's happening, is that Arlene and DUP, and I'm going to give, and this might, offend people that from my own community by saying this, but they have a job to do, and they are trying to build peace with what you can't build peace with, Jack. And I explained that in my last statement there, where I said that you have people that continue to stabilise Northern Ireland. That's the IRA, the Republican movement, and Ireland is trying so hard to work with those people. But what it is doing is it is setting Ireland at odds with their own community. And many people within our own community right now are crying out for the DUP, and they're saying to the DUP, look, what we need to do is they say that the Belfast Agreement, the Good Friday Agreement, is sacrosanct. They say that it is an internationally recognised agreement, and the EU and everybody else in times of the Brexit, they said that agreement cannot be broke. It cannot be broke under any circumstances. But what it is that we're asking the DUP, get up off your knees, please get up off your knees and make a meaningful, proactive protest against the only meaningful, proactive protest that you can actually make right now. And that meaningful, proactive protest is for the DUP to suspend all workings within the Belfast Agreement and everything that flows from the Belfast Agreement. Because I'm saying right now, Jack, that there's nobody that's listening to British Unionists in Northern Ireland. There's nobody, not the Conservative Party, not the mainstream media, not the Dublin government, not the EU, and everybody is treating us like second-class citizens, having discriminated against us and having taken away our democracy. So again, I've been appealing, as people in my community have been appealing to the DUP to not to wreck, not to ruin, not to completely obliterate the Good Friday Agreement, but to say that, look, we are making the only meaningful proactive protest that we can make right now, and that is suspension of any workings with Dublin, any workings within North-South bodies, any workings with the EU, until such times as British Unionists in Northern Ireland are returned to being first-class citizens. So that's what I would like to see Arlene Foster doing. And, some people would say to me that that's an extreme position to hold. But something, Jack, there's a lot at stake. I was born British in Northern Ireland. I am British. That's my birthright. And my birthright is being taken away. So I'm appealing to people not to fight. I'm saying that the fight is actually with our politicians. And right now, our DUP are our main politicians. They are the leaders of unionism within Northern Ireland. And it is those people who solely have the responsibility for ensuring that we're returned to being first-class citizens in our own land, Jack.
Yeah, I forgot to turn my mic on this time. But yeah, no, certainly I agree. I agree with you there. I think it's something which we have to push forward for and to defend the union, really. And I think that's the most important thing I think hopefully our audience can take away from this is just the importance of defending the union and making sure we all stick together. I've seen a few comments where I said it doesn't matter where you're born, we're all British here, and that's what unites us together. We are strong together. We have such a high status in the world. Again, it's not spoken about why the union is great, but again, we're powerful because we are four nations who have stuck together and have achieved amazing things together. Britain at one point, the United Kingdom, was the only nation in the world to stand against the Nazis, for example, and the Nazi Empire. And we've done amazingly good things. We have a great economy going. We're well respected. But once we start breaking that up, that's when we're going to start losing respect on the global table. That's when we're going to start becoming just another irrelevant country out there where we're bullied by the larger countries. But again, despite being small, despite having sort of a tiny population compared to a lot of other nations, we still have such a great place on the global stage. And I think it's so important and not risk sort of these small-minded nationalists breaking that up, really. Welcome back, Billy. Good to have you back.
Apologies, Jack. I can't explain what happened. I actually think I have a Luddite in another life because this happens to me all the time. But the thing just shut down. But anyway, I got back. I don't know how I did it, but I got back. Apologies.
Perfect. And I think, yes, if we move on to the next question. So annoyingly, I can't find it. It was said sort of earlier on, but someone was asking if you guys could sort of explain what's going on in Scotland. I don't know if you guys know much about what's happening in Scotland, but it's not widely known that it's very similar to what's going on in Belfast in Scotland, where you've got in Glasgow, for example, you have sort of flown in the streets. And so would you guys like to talk about sort of the Unionist versus Republican situation in Scotland? And would you be able to explain that a bit to our viewers?
Well, I think what we have, particularly in the west of Scotland, and I think John would agree with me. The difficulty that you have there is that you have sort of like republicanism and loyalism there, and they'd be very big supporters. Some people may have came across and actually got involved in the conflict, and others would have certainly been supplying weapons and stuff like that, particularly Republicans. I think that, so you can see that in the west of Scotland, there's a lot of sectarianism stuff goes on. And I think a lot of that is around, people want to remain part of the UK and others want to leave. So it's similar, only it's in a Scottish context. So I think it's very difficult to sort of explain, but I know that, in terms of Scotland, you will find that people will be on the sort of unionist side in terms of supporting unionists to actually remain, and then you'll have Republicans who's going to be on the SNP side, or for the want of a better term, separatist side, and they're going to argue that. So it's similar. They haven't had the conflict in any way that we've had. I mean, a lot of it I think is being carried out maybe with some street violence, but there's definitely that divide in Scotland as well, but it's mainly based in the west of Scotland. And I think from what I see and hear is that people are now trying to unite against that to make sure that they get the unions vote out. I'm not sure, Jack, whether the Conservatives or what's going on, but I know at one stage that they didn't want other people interfering in it and wanted to deal with it themselves, and I accept that and understand that. We would have not necessarily a political party in Scotland, but we do have the parties connected to us, but they don't stand in elections. We didn't register them to stand there because we didn't want to make the situation worse, but our people who are there would be supporting that notion of remaining within the UK, and that's why we didn't want them to form a political party, but they are what we would call associates to the party, but they can't stand in election. But what they can do is that they can lobby and they can support the whole notion of standing against, or supporting people who will stand against the SNP.
That's good to hear. John, is there anything you'd like to add at all?
Yeah, Jack. I would just like to tell you what someone who came from the Labour Party, a lady who was a solicitor, and she said to me, John, nationalism is about keeping your country, not giving it away. And she laid it out just like this. She said to me, that Irish nationalists, for example, even Republicans, that what they do or what they're doing right now is that they're wanting away from the United Kingdom. They're wanting away from the British government, and they're wanting to hand themselves over to the EU. So they're out of the frying pan and into the fire. And that lady actually came from Dublin, and she says, well, John, I just can't get that. And then she started to talk about the Scottish nationalists, who are exactly the same way in terms of is that they're so-called Scottish nationalists, but they're really not. They're wanting to become part of the European Union. So Trade Descriptions Act, it should really apply to both those sets of people. And in Scotland, as Billy said, what you do have is you have a scenario similar to what we have, whereby the age-old argument occurs, whereby that there are people that want to remain part of the United Kingdom, and they're unionists. And then we have people that want to join in with the Scottish nationalists. And then we've had all that play into the mix, Billy, as you say, that, Scotland is very close to Northern Ireland, always has been and always will be. And that's no matter what side of the community that you come from. I mean, in early days, from Scotland to Northern Ireland, the crossings are so short that people used to come across in small boats, and they used to come to and from. And there's that linkage between Northern Ireland and Scotland, and as I say, there always will be. So whilst you have, republicanism and loyalism in Northern Ireland, you're always going to have that in Scotland also. And as Billy quite rightly points out, it's along the west coast. It's where the crossing points are closer to Northern Ireland, is the truth of the matter. So yeah, that's Scotland for you.
Yeah, very interesting, guys. Thank you for explaining that to our audience. So again, just before we end, do you guys have any sort of party words you'd like to say tonight before we finish up? So yeah, Billy, if you'd like to go first. You still need to unmute yourself. Billy, I think. Oh, there we go.
I've got it now. Sorry, I wouldn't go off there. See what I mean about technology?
We're not having fun with tech tonight, are we?
Yeah. It definitely was a Luddite in the last life, and being punished for it now. But anyway, Jack, I mean, just from my point of view, I think it'd be useful in terms of more things, I guess, where other people from Northern Ireland who are elected as well and not elected actually get the viewpoint across. I just want to make sure that we have access to English, England, Scotland and Wales, and people hear it. We need to be actually arguing about, our place in the union. We also need to argue about what we've contributed to the union, and we need to argue about how wonderful we think the union is. And from my point of view, I think we're very lucky in the UK, because after the Second World War, we got the best ever legacy we could have got, and that was the NHS and welfare rights. If you think about it around the world, other people just don't have that, and we have it. And I know that everybody may not agree with the welfare rights bit or the NHS, but the reality is that it doesn't matter how rich or how poor you are. When you go for healthcare, it's free at the point of access, and if you want to go private, you can go private. And I have to say that, we really need to remember that that's it. But it's not just about those things. But what I am saying is that why would you want to go into the Republic of Ireland or leave Scotland, and not have those things? We know that it's only when you go to third level education that you start to pay, unless you actually choose to go to Eton or somewhere, of course. But I mean, we have schools, and those schools, are free as well at that point of access. So from my point of view, I think, the United Kingdom is a wonderful place. I think it's a very democratic society, and I think that when we look at Westminster, it has to be the father or the mother of all the houses that are represented around the world. I think that we led that democracy and we continued it, and I think that so it's a great thing. So I just want people to understand. I want people to actually support us to stay where we are, and I want people to understand that it's very important in our Britishness, and it's there. So Jack, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity tonight, and I hope in future that we'll be working together again on the same issues.
Oh, 100%. Thank you very much for coming on. And yeah, Turning Point, we've always got a place to promote unionism. Again, we do support unionism, and we're all about facilitating voices which aren't being listened to necessarily, or maybe aren't normally seen in sort of the mainland UK or from sort of regional elements of the UK. Is we want to give you guys a voice and a platform, because it's taking the spotlight away from London, which is only really a small part of the UK, and putting it back to the people who actually push forward the good conservative unionist people of this country. John, are there any parting words you'd like to give?
Yeah, Jack, I would just again like to appeal to the people in England, Scotland and Wales who watches this. I know that it's a large platform that you have, and there's a lot of people, even though they may not have been here tonight, they'll be, coming in the coming days. So, Northern Ireland, contrary to, some people's beliefs, it's British to the core. As I say, I have a British passport. I was born British. I'm British by birthright, and that's not gonna change. No matter what, it's not going to change, not now or not in the future. Now, we may have had, in my honest opinion, some silly decisions that has been made by some people who were under pressure as a result of Brexit. But I'm asking those people to examine their consciences and to work out that Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom, and we are stronger together as a United Kingdom. And once that if we start to break up and that really serves no one's purpose, because here's what I believe about world politics, about globalization and about the EU, is that I'm always a great believer in having your politics close to home, having your politicians close to home, in order that if they make any silly decisions, Jack, what you can do is that you can lobby them and you can, threaten them with the vote. because the vote is the only thing that the politician understands. But once that your politics goes to, say, for example, that say the EU and then into globalization, then what happens is that you have no chance of changing anything. And we see that a lot in a lot of things that happens today. So for that reason, as I say, that's why that the United Kingdom needs to stay together. And for anyone that calls themselves a unionist, and I'm appealing to the Conservative Party right now, examine your conscience, look in the mirror and think about what you've done and think about what you're doing. Because Northern Ireland, what was it? Some people say that we're more British than Finchley. I think that was the quote that was used in the past. Well, I'm going to say something, Jack. We're even more British than that. You believe me. Thanks, Jack.
Excellent. Great to hear. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And thank you to John Yates from Forgotten Voices Media and Restore UK, sorry. And we have Councillor Billy Hutchinson, the leader of the Progressive Union Party. So thank you both for coming on this evening, and hopefully we can have you both on again in future. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Goodbye. Good night.
Thank you.